Good afternoon. Welcome to the International Spy Museum. I am delighted, as always, to welcome Dave Major, one of our founding board members here at the museum. Many of you know him, but some of you don't. So for those who don't, Dave was the first FBI official to be appointed to the National Security Council, where he served as the Director of Counterintelligence, Intelligence, and Security Programs. During his 24-year FBI career, specializing in counterintelligence, he was involved in more than 100 espionage cases, and he can tell you about all of them in detail. He has the most amazing memory and grasp of espionage I've ever heard. And he is the founder and president of the CI Center, which he will tell you more about. It's my pleasure and your treat to hear Dave Major.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's been here before for one of our GTech briefings? Okay, one, two, all right. You know, this is an interesting process that we go through because it changes every month. And as you heard, I come from an FBI background. And after I retired, I came here to the Spy Museum, and I also formed my own company. And I like to say we run a little red schoolhouse. Because one of my experiences when I was at the White House is how few people understood counterintelligence. The higher you went, I used to find the less they knew, until I actually went into the Oval Office and sat down and briefed the President of the United States. And I want you to know that's a very humbling experience from a young man from Syracuse University and from Potsdam, New York. Anybody know where Potsdam, New York is? The frozen tundra of the world. My father was a college professor there, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're there and you're sitting in the Oval Office talking to the President of the United States, and he says, "You know, don't you?" This is Ronald Reagan. "You know, don't you? I was an informant for the FBI." Well, my reaction is, "But of course I know that, Mr. President. We're proud of that fact." Lying blatantly to the President of the United States, because he never, ever, that I was ever told that he had been an informant, which he had been in the 1940s when he was the president of the Actors Guild. But I thought that was interesting, that how could I have become, been in the Bureau, worked this material most of my life, and not know that fact? And I realized sometimes we don't understand our history, we don't understand where we came from, everybody's in the moment, and yet in reality, it's particularly in this business, it's not just about the moment, it's how did we get to the moment. And so we established a thing that I call my little red schoolhouse, the CI Center, or Center for Counterintelligence and Security Studies, and we do training for the government and the private sector on counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and security. Well, to go into people who are actually in the government after you're out of the government and you're retired, you have to have some credibility to do that. How do you maintain your credibility? And they say you're just some old fart who remembers old stories and doesn't remember your own name after a while. And so we do a massive amount of research at the center so that we know what is happening around the world in the business of terrorism, espionage, cybersecurity, as it always morphs. And that's why we established this thing called Spypedia. And Spypedia is the single most comprehensive database on spies, terrorism, cyber attacks in the world. It's updated every single day, and we have a case study on every one of the espionage cases in the United States since 1945. Every single day we update it. We look at every terrorist attack since 95, since 9/11. And we also update those. And we also look around the world as new cases break in espionage around the world. And they're always happening if you follow it. Most of the material we collect is not in the Washington Post or the Washington Beacon or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. They have a very small sliver of what's happening in this world. And the result is most of us as Americans don't understand the world we live in. And so we created this database, and people used to say to me, "David, why don't you write a book?" Well, the problem is in this profession, a book is only good for about 6 months before it's yesterday's news. And while it may be historical, it isn't really what people want, and that is what's happening today and what happened 20 years ago. And so in today's digital age, we created this thing, this digital encyclopedia that's about 8,000 pages deep. It's updated every single day. And someone has to manage that account, and that's why this lovely lady's here, and I want to meet her. Megan Smith, I'll have you talk to her at the end. She and I are in the business of trying to get people to become members of Spypedia, and that's what we're doing here. I want you to see what's in it, because I want you to understand the value of this to anybody who should be, as I said, the smartest person in the room. And this will make you the smartest person in the room, because most people do not have a grasp of this world of espionage and terrorism. Now, museums struggle because a museum is museum. And a museum tends to be, dusty if you would, and older if you would. They try very hard to maintain currency, but it's hard to have it on the breaking information. So that's one of the things we add also with Spypedia. So I asked the people who have been here before, because in every one of our cases, we talk about new cases they develop, and as they develop, you'd always ask the question, what about the rest of the story? What happened to these cases? So periodically, we stop in these briefings, and I try to bring you back into what happened with some of the big cases as they broke this last year. We also do a thing in here that I might invite you to, and that is usually at the beginning of the year, we do a 2-hour briefing. It's a worldwide review of espionage. And it's done at evening, it's done in here, and we try to give you what we do here month to month. But I only have an hour and 15 minutes to do it here, and there's so much that goes on, I always run out of time before I run out of material. But let me update you on some interesting cases that have taken place that if you were with us before or you followed it, you may have seen it. Just at the end of last year was this case that came on the scene, the Greenwich Village bombing plot. How many even heard of this before? Up in New York. It was a big deal in New York because of the people that were involved.
Hampton, the new year was to be the time of celebrating a new life for Morgan Gleedman. However, those plans quickly changed over the weekend. And tonight, the 27-year-old New Yorker along with her boyfriend are being viewed as potential terrorists by prosecutors. Where did it all go wrong for Morgan Gleedman, reported to be this woman here? It's the question many are asking in the 48 hours after her arrest. The 27-year-old grew up surrounded by opulence. Now her future may be surrounded by 3 walls and bars if charges levied against her as a bomb maker are proven true. The story ignited on Saturday morning after NYPD detectives executed a search warrant at this building on West 9th Street, just blocks from Washington Square Park. Inside, detectives found Gleedman along with her partner in life and her alleged partner in crime, boyfriend Aaron Green. In their unit, a sawed-off shotgun and rounds. But it was the bomb squad's discovery of HMTD, a highly explosive substance that forced surrounding buildings to be evacuated, and Gleedman to be viewed as a potential homegrown terrorist. For the record, HMTD is the same explosive substance that the man convicted of planning to blow up LAX back at the Millennium had on him when he was arrested. And inside the unit, there were actual pages from the terrorist encyclopedia, coffee table literature that is far from ordinary, which makes this even more shocking considering Gleedman's privileged lifestyle. She reportedly grew up on the Upper East Side, living on Park Avenue and attending Dalton. Her father, a respected physician, her mother, a highbrow realtor. And her boyfriend, Aaron, the 31-year-old, was a graduate of Harvard's prestigious Kennedy School of Government. Now, I did speak with Green's attorney this afternoon, and she told me that she was not going to comment on this case and that she actually had to get caught up with it. Now, as for Gleedman, she will not only have to prove her innocence regarding this case, but she's also going to have to try to prove that she's a fit mother. When she was arrested on Saturday, she was 9 months pregnant. She was not arraigned yesterday nor today. She was reportedly taken to the hospital with labor pains. Now, there is much speculation that she actually delivered. If so, according to medical personnel at an OBGYN office that I spoke with today, they told me that in these cases, when a mother has been arrested and she delivers, then that baby, in all likelihood, would have already been taken by family services. Reporting from West 9th Street, Mario Diaz, Pix 11 News. Tamsin, back to you.
Why this was such a big deal in New York is because these were 2 people who had a silver spoon their whole life. They grew up with very well-to-do parents, Upper East Side, as you know, and then all of a sudden they found out, here she is in drugs, she's living down in this area, and he's tried up for terrorism. And she was 9 months pregnant. She did give birth to her child after she was arrested, and he was 31 years old, and he was the one who apparently had a fascination with bombs. Well, they found weapons in the apartment, and so what was this all about, you would say? Grew up, as you can see, the advert where they were doing, what their backgrounds were. This is what shocked New Yorkers, as only New Yorkers know how to be shocked, when they're saying, how could this take place? Green's father was also a very, very prominent architect. So they had everything, and yet here they are in this lifestyle. Well, if you move the camera forward since this took place, and we talked about it back in January, in March there was a very good article that I recommend you to, New York, and the New York News and features called Kaboom. And if you read that article, which we don't have time to go into, you realize that this was a very troubled young lady who had trouble with drugs. She was, I would suggest, my personal opinion, she had hover parents. She could do no wrong. As a result of that, they went down a very dark path. And so the story is played out very well in this article called Kaboom, and that was in March. I would encourage you to read it. So in January, you can see how she's emaciated because of her drugs, which she was. And then by April, she's moved in with her parents. She's arrested. She was released on bond, living with her parents in April. And in July of this last year, he was accused and he pled guilty to explosive possessions. And he received a 7-year sentence for his activity. So that's how that case came to an end. Just at the end of July of this year, he pled guilty, got 7 years. And she pled guilty to 5 months probation. And she's still living with her parents, so she's not going to be incarcerated. But one of the debates that's taking place is who has access to the child. Well, both the Greens, the man's, Aaron's parents, and the Glickmans want to have access to the child, and they don't want the other grandparents to do it. So it's a great soap opera that's playing out in New York, but that's how it ended in August 1st of this year with her getting probation. August 15th, we all should remember that, not just because of our taxes, but April 15th, not August, but April 15th, because of what happened in Boston. So we all kind of remember that. Let me bring you up to speed on that case, by the way. In case you missed it, within 30 days, he has become an icon for a number of young teenagers on the internet saying that he's an innocent man, that because he's cute, that he couldn't have done it. You should read it. It'll make you find it really interesting. So he's got his own number of people that are supporting him. That was in March. Well, the wheels of justice move on. On July 10th, he had a probationary hearing with the family, and he pled not guilty to a very large charge, 30 charges. You can have all of them in the Spypedia. What we do is we create a case page on each one of these, and we have all the legal documents related to it. And then we follow it every day. Anything that takes place with that, we can show you what the legal documents are, not the emotional side of it. So he pled guilty to 30 counts on July 10th of this year. You may remember this also has caused a lot of stir in America because of him being on the front page of the Rolling Stones, July 19th. People said that for young teenagers that, once again, you're glorifying this man who's involved with this killing people. So that has been an issue. Editorials written about it. That was July 19th. As a result of that, the Boston police were so upset about some of this taking place, they released some photographs, and this is one of them. The red spot on his head, by the way, is from the laser beam. It's not blood. But that was when he got out of the boat, and then, as you know, he was wounded in there. So the police officers released these photographs. You can see them. We have them on Spypedia. You can go back and search it yourself. But that was in response to this because the police said that I believe that the image that was portrayed by Rolling Stone magazine was an insult to any person who has ever worn a uniform of any color or any police organization or military branch, and the family members who have even lost a loved one served in the line of duty. That was his response. That's why he released the photographs as a big cause. Well, just last week, on August 9th, they indicted 2 of the 3 people that were helping him, and they charged them with lying to a government official and also obstruction of justice. And so they were indicted on August 9th, and today they're appearing in court for their indictment, 2 of the 3. Phillips has not been, he was separated. He's on a $100,000 bond on this, and he has not been indicted. He's pending indictment. So that's what's happened to 3 people that helped him, and that's ongoing, as I say, today. It is also reported, what about the wife of the terrorist who died? And Catherine, there was some reporting that her parents were trying to bring her back to the Catholic Church. There was some debate, significant amount of debate, that one of the reasons that she converted to become Islam is that she was really affected by the what had taken place with the priest and child molesting, and she said she wanted to protect her children, and so she wanted to embrace the religion and didn't have that in it. That was her justification in some reporting, and some said that she's living with her parents, and that some said she's backing away from Islam. But then as of the 9th of August, the photograph on the right-hand side indicated that's not true. So what's going to happen to her? She has not been indicted, but what's going to happen to her and her life and her child is to be determined. All right? Let me move on to another case that we talked about. It was terrorism in Canada. They've had a number of significant ones recently that took place, and one took place on July 1st, and last month we talked about this case. This was on July 1st, Canadian Day, where there was a big bomb that was placed in front of the legislation in Victoria that was supposed to be set off, and if it had, it would have made Boston pale in comparison to it. And as a result, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and RCMP got in the middle of this terrorist plot, and they arrested this 30-year-old woman by the name of Amanda, and this man by the name of John, 39 years old, were arrested for doing this, and that was in July 1st. The couple were identified as self-radicalized into al-Qaeda ideology, that is the Salafist ideology, and they had no international links, according to what the Canadians said. They did leave it in a basement. They also were building bombs that were identical to the ones that had been used in Boston. And so that plot kind of shook the Canadians when they did it, and they went in and talked about what was inside their houses, and this was some of the material that was inside the house where these two lived. Well, here's sort of an update on that case.
Organized Canada Day bombing plot at the BC legislature. Friends of the two suspects say they doubt John Stewart Nuttall and Amanda Carty could have organized such an elaborate scheme. And one associate says there were some mysterious men around Nuttall prior to his arrest. Eric Rankin has the latest details.
According to the RCMP, John Stewart Nuttall and his common-law wife Amanda Anna Cordy were the masterminds behind the plot to build these pressure cooker bombs and blow them up on Canada Day in Victoria. Self-radicalized terrorists inspired by al-Qaeda ideology. But Nuttall's best friend believes that was impossible.
He didn't have the money, he didn't have transportation, he didn't have the means, and where did he get the knowledge and the mentality to do this?
Nelson says Nuttall has the mentality of a 16-year-old. Instead, he says he was concerned about 3 or 4 so-called Muslim brothers who began hanging out with Nuttall around the time police alleged the conspiracy was hatched. 6 months ago, after Nuttall was kicked out of this Surrey mosque over an unknown religious dispute. Nelson says the men constantly visited Nuttall's nearby apartment, driving a new silver or black pickup and a red car.
They were coming by his house every other day. One of them employed him at a furniture store apparently, got him delivering packages.
Nelson was wary of those mysterious packages and of the men who paid Nuttall for their delivery.
None of these people I've actually seen surface, come up and say anything or come forward. They just disappeared. And I just find that suspicious.
Nelson also wonders if at least one of Nuttall's new friends was an RCMP undercover officer. On Tuesday, investigators made it plain they believe Nuttall and Cordy acted alone.
There is no evidence to indicate that these individuals had the support or were acting at the direction of a terrorist group per se.
So were Nuttall and Cordy, as police allege, behind the foiled Canada Day bombing plot? Nelson had an odd phone conversation with his friend just 2 days before July 1st.
And he said to me, I'm in the Okanagan, I'm in Kelowna area. Then he changed his story and said, I'm in Victoria.
Nuttall and Cordy will have their next court appearance next week. Nelson says he'll be there. He doubts Nuttall's Muslim brothers will show. Eric Rankin, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, as you know, since you've been coming to these presentations, or you follow this, that Canadian case is just like the successful cases we have in the United States, that somewhere along the line he tripped over the officials who gave him bombs that didn't work. And we're very fortunate that we're able to get involved in that and run these kinds of sting operations, and that's what happened to the Canadians. When he says some of his friends must have been undercover Canadian officials, yeah, but of course they were probably, they were. All right, so that appeared. Now, on the 7th, they appeared in court, the two of them, and he has been sent off towards a mental evaluation by the Canadian officials, and they're supposed to adjudicate this case in September. So if they do that, we'll be updating this for you in our October GTEC briefing. But you can follow this one. This is getting no publicity here in the United States, but in Canada, it's a really big deal, as you can imagine what the significance of that case was. So Let me pick up another case that started in October that we talked about in November, but had a major event take place recently. And this had to do with a Bangladeshi young man who came to the United States, and his plot was to blow up the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Now, he had come here on a student visa. He wanted to attack and hurt the United States economy. He wanted to attack the president if he could. So he came from Bangladesh with the intent of doing it using a student visa as a result of it.
The face of suspected bomber Qazi Mohammed Nafis, and this was his alleged target, the Federal Reserve Bank. He was arrested after he allegedly parked a van packed with what he thought was 1,000 pounds of explosives, trying to kill hundreds of innocent New Yorkers during the morning rush.
He clearly had the intent of creating mayhem here.
It was a sting operation, and Nafis was under intense surveillance for months by the FBI, NYPD, and Homeland Security agents. The undercovers even provided some of the fake bomb parts. But they say it was Nafis who picked his target, helped build the bomb, and they only got onto him after he approached an informant about wanting to carry out a major attack. Targeting America's economy is the most efficient way to draw the path of obliteration to America, he allegedly said. Officials say his initial plot was supposed to be a suicide mission to bomb the New York Stock Exchange, but tight security there had him change his target to the New York Fed. Last week, investigators say he bought ammonium nitrate and worked on building the device, not knowing he was being watched each step of the way. Nafis was living in Jamaica, Queens, and the FBI raided his apartment, taking away evidence today. He came to the U.S. in January from Bangladesh on a student visa, studying in Missouri as a cover for his alleged plot. Prosecutors say he was inspired by Osama bin Laden and one-time Yemen cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, and learned bomb-making from Al-Qaeda's Inspire magazine. They say he tried to recruit others here and as far away as San Diego, but never realized the so-called Al-Qaeda associates he found were actually undercover agents.
If you recall, if you were here in May, I made a comment that after Boston, we were lucky that instead of the tragedy, that there were so many other cases that were like Boston that were interdicted before they were able to do it. And this is one of them. This would have been a very large bomb. It could have killed a lot of people if it had gone off. He entered the United States, was a student to be here at Southern Missouri State University, and that's when he was identified by the FBI in July of last year in this plot, and he was inspired, as a number of have been, by Inspire magazine. You'll see that surfaces in many of these cases. And then after numerous meetings, he basically said he was excited about this new plan because he would allow him to conduct additional attacks. He didn't have to conduct a Shaheed operation and kill himself. He could just put the bomb there, and then he could do many of them. So his words himself were pretty condemning for what he wanted to do. And so he drove the warehouse. He made a 1,000-pound bomb. That's a big bomb for a nitrate bomb. And he went and parked the vehicle, walked away to a Dumar hotel, and from there, he did his video talking about why he was doing it, and he went to detonate it with his cell phone, and it didn't work. Well, you can imagine that must have been a oops, as far as he was concerned. And they watched him. He made repeated calls trying to send it off. It wouldn't, because it had now been made inert by the government as a result of it. And after monitoring this, the FBI entered the vehicle, find out that he did activate it, to put those two together, and then they arrested him. And his family, however, you can imagine, reacted as they always do.
This is the family of a 21-year-old Bangladeshi man accused of plotting to bomb the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. From their home in Dhaka, Roshan Akhtar denies her grandson's involvement. I don't believe he did this. I don't believe he is capable of doing this. Qazi Mohammed Rezwano Ansar Nafis was arrested on Wednesday and charged with attempting to use a weapon of mass destruction and attempting to provide material support to Al-Qaeda. His sister claims he was victimized.
We don't think it can be done by him. For higher studies, he went to USA and then he got admitted here. He got 50% scholarship there.
If convicted, Nafis faces life in prison.
So the family did what the families always do and say, well, he couldn't have done that, must have been something else. Well, on February of this year, He pled guilty in federal court. They had a pretty good case in doing it, and he said, I had intended to commit a violent jihadist act. I deeply and sincerely regret my involvement in this case. I'm sure he is because he got caught. And as a result of that, in this last week on August 9th, he appeared in federal court. When I'm talking about it, he got 30 years in federal prison. Now, for those of them who have been here before, let me just highlight something. If you get 30 years in a federal court, how long are you going to serve in prison? 30 years. Why is that? There's no probation in the federal system. So if you want to get charged by the locals, not by the feds. So it's 30 is 30. If he's 21, and he's probably now 22 today, so he'll get out when he's 52 years old. Who knows what the world will be like in 30 years, but it will change as far as he's concerned. So that was an update on an interesting case. So how big is this terrorism threat? Let me put some numbers on it. Every single month I tell you what the current numbers are. And if someone asked you tonight, or last night, how many people have been arrested for terrorism-related crimes in the United States, or how many plots have been uncovered in the United States since 9/11, could you feel comfortable in answering that question to give you a sense of how big this thing is? And I'm only tracking the people when the plots, when somebody is arrested and charges are made. Sometimes they're not always arrested, but charges are made. Well, it turns out we're up now to 148 plots and 398 people. We're moving in on the 400 number, and as you can see the numbers here, the blue is the number of plots, and the red are the number of people who have been arrested related to this. And you can see since 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, how the numbers are escalating significantly. If you'll notice the blue line, the number of plots. Now, in a terrorism attack, generally, the average number of people in a plot is 5.5. You have some single terrorists where only one person is arrested, and the largest plot we've ever seen is 9/11, which was 19, but the average is about 5.5 as we track them. And we track on Spypedia their citizenship, their motivations, their age, and all the other demographics you'd ever want to know, so I can give you those answers and do periodically in this briefing. So the number is 398 individuals arrested in 148 plots and counting. Into July, which is new. Well, let me take you back to June because we had two cases that kind of dovetail. This one we did talk about last month, but I want to highlight it. Here's a 18-year-old who lived in Babylon, who had a Russian background, who decided as a high schooler he wanted to become a terrorist. And as a result of that, he attempted to go to Yemen so he could go in and fight in Yemen with the Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, and so he could fight against U.S. forces. This is an American who immigrated here from Russia. He wanted to commit violent jihad, and that was made public in June of 2013. In a recorded conversation, he expressed his desire to travel there and fight in Yemen and explained that he wanted to fight for 2 years. Well, that would have made him a sophomore in high school. By the time he decided he wanted to do this. And during one of the conversations he had with an undercover NYPD intelligence division, oh Allah, please allow me and my brother to fight in this cause. Oh Allah, please give us one of the two victories on the ground or victory through martyrdom, which is dying in the name of Allah. So on July 21st of 2013, he boarded a plane and he was on his way to Yemen. That's when he was arrested by the JTTF and charged with supporting terrorism. In the case in June, he pled guilty, and then he was sent for a psychiatric evaluation because of his age, and that was supposed to come back in the end of September. So maybe in October I can give you an update as to where he stands. But having pled guilty, he's pleading guilty to 30 years, and he's 18 years old. Well, I tell you that case because it wasn't the only one. This is his case.
No answer at the large house in Babylon where neighbors say Justin Kalibi lived. Living the American dream, prosecutors say Kalibi dreamed of becoming a terrorist. He became radicalized and called himself Umar Abdul Rahman after, in part, following the sermons online of Anwar al-Awlaki and other terror leaders.
We're still trying to determine exactly what the radicalization process was, but it's certainly another example of homegrown terrorist tendencies.
Kalibi was in federal court in Central Islip after secretly pleading guilty back in March and at first cooperating with the FBI and NYPD. Investigators say he plotted to travel to Yemen, and they have him on tape, saying he wanted to hit America and its allies in Yemen, whether it's the U.S. drones or their puppets in the Yemeni army, or who knows, if American agents or whatever, U.S. Special Forces.
All indications are that he certainly was committed to Al-Qaeda and committed to fighting against the U.S. and U.S. interests in Yemen.
All right, so there's a case very similar to that took place in July down in Jacksonville. Got no publicity here in Washington, D.C., but this Jacksonville man, Sheraton Bell, was also trying to go and do the same thing. He, along with another individual who he contacted, indicated, along with a third person, an unidentified juvenile, wanted to go to Yemen and travel to the AQAP and fight with them. And so in September, he and the juvenile, and there were 3 people involved, but he and the juvenile did travel to Warsaw and then to Jordan. Now, they actually traveled to Warsaw, and from Warsaw, they flew to Tel Aviv, but the Israelis wouldn't let him in the country. So they turned him around and sent him back to Warsaw. They got another plane, came down to Jordan, and in Jordan, they were trying to find passage to go into Yemen to can be involved in this jihad. And during this time, he had a juvenile with him. They returned to the United States in January of 2013. They actually bought some communication equipment when they were in Jordan. They were communicating back here to Washington, D.C. on their grand plan to participate in this jihad, and this happened.
And this just into the CBS 12 newsroom tonight. A 19-year-old Jacksonville man has been indicted on terrorism charges. Prosecutors say Shelton Bell wanted to join Al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen and engage in fighting. He's also accused of attempting to recruit others. He faces 2 charges, inspiring and attempting to provide material support to terrorists. The charges carry a maximum penalty of 15 years each. Bell is currently being held in the Duval County Jail on unrelated charges, including grand theft and filing of false insurance.
Now, what made this case interesting is how they came about, because the mosque where he was involved with, members there said that he was trying to approach young people, and this one man was very concerned. He's a member of the Central Board of Trustees. He became very concerned that they were approaching juveniles, and so they did the right thing. They came back and says, this guy's recruiting people for jihad, and they went and they offered it over to the FBI. And as a result of that, the FBI became aware of it, and this man was arrested. The juvenile had not been arrested, nor has the other person that were involved. So 3 people involved, but 1 was part of the operation. All right, let me turn to espionage. So that's kind of where we stand in the world of terrorism. Each month we get at least 1 or 2 cases like that. I'd be very happy to come in here and every month and tell you there's nothing, but there seems to be something every single month that someone's arrested. And so let's turn to espionage and see where we are. Well, if you've been living on the moon, you probably don't know there's any discussions about espionage going on. If you have been in the world, you know that there have been some significant discussions. Before I pursue this, I'd like to do one thing, if I might, and digress from this. There's a man in the room who's one of my great mentors, one of the best counterintelligence officers I ever had the privilege of working with from OSI, Bill Gay. And Bill, would you please stand up and do it? Because Bill and I go way back. And I mean that sincerely. I know a lot of people in the business and worked with people from the community, but Bill Gay is one of the great counterintelligence officers I ever had the privilege of working with OSI. And we go back to the 70s when Bill was also in New Jersey. Now, for my guests from New Jersey, as I said to you before, remember, New Jersey is the spy capital, one of the spy capitals of the world, because what a great place to operate, because you're a target-rich environment and there's lots of intelligence officers around that area. So Bill and I worked those streets there, and we had to speak from authority about espionage goes on in New Jersey. It also goes on where you are right now, which is Washington, D.C., where there are more intelligence officers operating in the city today. All right, if you talk about espionage, you really got to break your cases down into 3 kinds of cases to make sense out of this. And they are this. You have one kind of case where you have government secrets. This is what you call classified information, and somebody violates that by passing that information. You also have, since 1996, an ever-growing, continuing problem in the private sector world, and that is those who would steal the secrets of our strength as a society, and that is in corporate America. There's a huge growth of trade secret theft. And finally, in 96, we created a law that allowed us to respond to that. So when you talk espionage today, you got to look at that. If I had been talking to you in 95, I wouldn't have been able to even put my arms around those numbers because we didn't know those numbers at that time. And then there's another one, which is a real growth one, and that is instead of stealing your information, they steal your stuff. In other words, they divert technology that shouldn't be diverted to places like Iran and other places that the State Department and Commerce has specific rules that you cannot take some material and send them there. So these are called ITAR cases. And these are often run either by corporation to corporation or run by a foreign entity that's involved in doing that. And I can tell you that the largest, that in the corporate area, both whether it be the technology or the trade secrets, is China. That is where China operates today. Now, if I put numbers on there, there are 322 people compromising classified information that have been indicted for doing that, 124 and growing in the economic espionage world. Now, remember, the government side, we started counting these numbers in 45. In the corporate side, we started counting these numbers in 1996. And we have been counting, we, the CI Center, have been counting the corporate number, the ITAR diversion cases since 2004. And so as we start looking at these numbers, this is what we're looking at. Government leak cases, security cases, espionage cases, people involved in diversion, and we had a few people who defected pending arrest. So we watch and track very closely defectors from the United States and defectors to the United States. And we also talk about foreign nationals who do not have access to secrets but are involved in collection operations who are not protected for diplomatic immunity and therefore can be charged. So let me just make a couple comments about the law, and as I do each month so you understand it. What is espionage? Espionage, as we know and love it, 794, big espionage, go to jail for the rest of your life, is unauthorized transmittal of national defense information that is protected. The method we use to protect it is we classify it. But the law does not speak about classification. It talks about protected information that affects the military defense of the United States. And that's the stuff that if you do that, pass that information, and it's not authorized to a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power with intent to injure the United States or aid a foreign power or a political faction, you committed espionage. To do that, you can go to jail for the rest of your life. Now, that's seen by the world as a political crime. So espionage laws are never extraditable by anybody because they can be seen, and it is used as a ruse by some societies for political oppression. Not here in the United States, but in other societies. Therefore, it's not extraditable. Then it's a big espionage, life sentence or death. Then you have little espionage or preparatory acts. This is what Snowden has been charged with. Unauthorized transmittal of national defense information that is protected, same amount of information. However, this is the person who's not authorized to receive it with intent to unlawfully possess, retain, and transmit. The minute you take this information out of where you are in Hawaii and you take it to Hong Kong or anywhere else, or even your own home, you're in violation of Title 796. You cannot do this, take this protected information unauthorized to one of these places. That's why it's called a preparatory acts. Now, usually, people who commit espionage do both. They are charged with 793, which is a 10-year sentence, and 794, which is a life sentence. It's a lesser included offense. Now, it is true that in the Snowden case, there's an added charge, 798, which is compromising signals intelligence or communications intelligence. A special law was passed. So that's the laws we're talking about, and the law for that is 10 years. All right, now, I also talk about here one of the laws that's often used in the spy business is this law called FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act, which means that if you become a clandestine agent of a foreign power, you have to register. Well, it also means that if you represent a foreign power, if you're a lawyer, an accountant, a lobbyist, you get hired by some foreign government openly, you have to go down to the Department of Justice, to the Office of Foreign Registration, and register that you represent that government. There's a term of art in the law called agent. That's why I was a special agent, capital S, capital A, and never an agent. Because an agent means you get to represent somebody. Legally, A, small a, you represent somebody. Special agent is a job series in the FBI, capital S, capital A. Well, if you are an agent of a foreign power, you have to go down and register. It also means that if you become an agent of a government to steal their secrets, in other words, to become a clandestine agent or a collector for intelligence, a spy if you would, you have to go down to the Department of Justice within 10 days and register, I'm a spy for such and such country. Well, guess what? Most people don't do that. And they don't do that, it kind of flows in the whole face of the spy business, which is supposed to be covert. Because if we ever get anybody who's registering as an agent of a foreign power in clandestine collection, I assure you the FBI will go investigate them. And I know of no case we ever predicated based on that, so spies don't register. And if you don't register within 10 days, you can go to jail for 10 years. It's a great law. So and most people in the spy business get charged with that. Now, my favorite law, all the group in this one, and you hear me talk about it before, is Title 18, Section 1001, which means if you're a federal agent and you go to talk to somebody and that person lies to you, for every lie, you can go to jail for 5 years. Now, you don't have to be sworn. You can't lie to a federal agent. Number one, obstruction of justice is a crime, and also is lying to a federal agent. Now, when they always lie to you, right? The perps always lie to you, so you go down and talk to them. You know they've committed a crime, espionage. You go talk to them. They deny it. I used to say, time out. Let me just tell you, now you just committed a crime. That's 5 years. Let's start again, because if you do, we'll give you a mulligan on this. I won't count that as a crime. Hi, my name's Dave Major from the FBI. When I ask you a question, don't lie to me. They lie to you again. So almost always, people get charged in the spy business get charged with 1001. If you read our indictments, remember, on Spypedia, we have every single indictment and what they're charged with. And you'll see this surfaces over and over again. Then there's the economic espionage law, different, two kinds, government to private sector or private sector to private sector. One has 20 years, one has 10 years. And the insider threat is the new term, but there's nothing really new, and the insider threat has been with us. So we talked about the number of cases. All right, here's the number of cases we are as of this morning. We have 687 individuals who have been charged, and the average is 9.9. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the left-hand side is 1945, right-hand side is currently 2011. And the average line I have in there is 9.9, and you can see that we have continually been beating the average on a continuing basis. Now, this is partly driven by the fact we've been adding to this the diversion cases, and we've been adding that since 2004. But the number 687 is a result of it, 9.9. That's 322 people involved in classified information compromise, espionage, leaks, and security. Individuals involved in corporate economic espionage, 124, and diversion cases, 222. There's also 25 foreign nationals who have been indicted, collectors, if you would, from a foreign power who were involved in trying to get one of these three types of information, either diversion, economic material, or classified material. If we look at just the national security cases, leaks, and security cases, you can see the numbers we have here. How many that we've been having, and that's 349, about 5 per year. If we look at economic espionage cases, you can look at 77 cases with 124. Interesting in the corporate world. Unlike the government world, when someone's a spy, they tend to do it alone. There are a few rings, but not a lot of rings. In the corporate world, it tends to be usually with somebody else. Usually someone on the inside, someone on the outside. The average case is about 1.5, 1.7 people per case, usually with someone on the inside, someone on the outside who's involved in the conspiracy to steal corporate information. That has been the growth in America. As it relates to illegal exports, you can see once again, this is usually older people. They're more like 45 or older that are involved in doing this. And you have, once again, almost always at least 2 people involved in diversion cases. This is when you're shipping material that you're not supposed to a particular country. Which is both an FBI and a commerce violation. So we start talking about what countries are doing this. Well, if you look at the numbers, you can see Russia's still number 1 on our hit parade, and because they have a long head start and involved in doing it, very good, effective service. And then you have other countries involved in it. Notice China's only 18, but there's been a lot of China cases. We started looking at this one. Russia's up at the top. Now, I'm counting all 3 kinds of cases together. 160 Russian cases, but 121 Chinese cases. As of the year 2000, we only had 4 Chinese cases. In the last 13 years, we're now up to 121 Chinese cases. And if we look at these cases, that's the same chart, except the light blue is in the private sector and the dark blue is in the classified sector. And you can see the preponderance of the Russian cases have been government secrets. The preponderance of the Chinese cases have been in the private sector. And notice the one down below, Iran, all in the private sector. We have not seen Iran stealing classified information, but they are the biggest diverter of technology. Obviously, for their development and proliferation is where a lot of those cases are coming from. So that's why we've had the gross area. And as I said, if we look at China, the very first case we ever had when China was established as the PRC in 1949 was in 1985. And as you can see, very few cases until now where we have. And that's been the growth area. In companies, the number one government involved in this has been China cases. Where are the people that are employed? The biggest growth has been in the private sector. Private sector cases, you can see here that the private sector individuals have been involved is 335 because of the diversion cases and the economic cases. And then we have the regular foreign nationals, and then from there down you have the U.S. government agencies. Now let me make this point very clear. With the whole Snowden case, there was a lot of debate in the government. Well, this was a contractor problem, that Snowden was a contractor. And if we'd only get rid of those contractors, we'd stop the spy problem. And all I had to do was watch what happened in the newspaper arguing the case. The only fact is, facts don't prove that out to be true. Because if we look at all of the national security cases and when information has been compromised, either by leaks, security, or straight espionage, only 12% of them have been contractors. And in straight espionage, only 8% have been contractors. The great majority are government people who have access to secrets, not contractors. But the fact is, it doesn't make any difference whether they're a contractor of a government, but it's not a contractor problem. And yet it's been projected, if you only watch the media and you don't watch the facts, it is a contractor problem. And that does not proven out with any of the facts at all. So what Snowden was irrelevant to what he did. It was on his watch that he did it. So how are we doing catching national defense spies? Interesting question to ask. Well, one very interesting chart, and this, I think this is the only place you'll see this. We went back in the Senate, we continue to do this, and we said people who get arrested, how many active spies are out there who will eventually get arrested? Now, you don't know what you don't know. But if you say somebody was a spy on a particular year, and how many were out there that year who were actively involved in conducting espionage, and that will eventually get caught, well, the biggest most we ever had in 1 year was 53. But the average is 25 who are out there available to get caught. That's the red line. But for 33 years, the average has been above 25. Now, naturally, the last few years, those are spies to get caught. So that's why the numbers drop off in the last few years. But let me compare that to the number we actually caught. Same chart, same area. This goes from 0 to 60. Notice that our best year ever was 16 and 17 compared to the number out there. What does that tell you? It tells you that if you look, you'll find them. They are there. There are spies out there. It has nothing to do with the Cold War. It has to do with national interest. So let's update some cases that we previously discussed in JTAC that relate to espionage. Here's a really sad one. Some of you may remember Kenneth Bay. Kenneth Bay, who was a man who was conducting tours into the northeast corner of North Korea. There's an area there. It's an economic development area that you could take people who want to do a tour of North Korea. Now, I don't know who wants to take a tour of North Korea, but there were a few people. And when he went in there, and he's an American citizen, he was arrested in November, and then when he was tried in April of this year, and he was found guilty, and he was given 15 years of hard labor in North Korea. Now, this is not where you want to be for 15 years. And so he sort of fell off our scope as to what happened to Bay. Well, he surfaced again. He surfaced in the last week. And here's how it happened. This was the first part of the case.
Now, an American tour operator has been sentenced to 15 years hard labor in North Korea. Kenneth Bay was arrested in November and has been accused of hostile acts against the government. Well, for more on this, we can go to Harry Fawcett. He's in the South Korean capital, Seoul, for us. It's an interesting case, this one, Harry. What more do we know about this American man?
Well, we know he's 44 years old, that he was born here in South Korea. His usual place of residence in the United States is Washington State, but that he was a tour operator based for a large extent of the time in China, and had traveled several times before to North Korea.
All right, that's when he's arrested. Well, the 11th of this month, he was moved from a labor camp to a hospital, and his sister said he has significant problems, including back problems, kidney problems, liver problems. Among a few of the things, he's lost 50 pounds since he was arrested, and they actually released some video of him, and you can see it's not going well.
His eyes downcast and speaking Korean, U.S. citizen Kenneth Bay describes his life in jail.
I mainly work in the farm in this prison. I work from morning to dinner time, 8 hours a day. People here are very considerate, so I'm not working too hard. But my health is not in the best condition, so there are some difficulties.
Bae was detained in North Korea in November and is serving 15 years hard labor for committing what North Korea calls hostile acts.
Now they go on to what you could also talk about as a propaganda video that they released to North Koreans that look how well he's being taken care of. Doesn't look so well to me. So you would watch that story. Whether he dies there or gets back, I'm not sure. All right. In July 10th, last month, we gave a briefing here, and we started talking significantly about the Snowden case. Well, that's what I like to term the Snowden case. And I say this is a spy case with legs, because it has been in the news since the June 6th. Now, one of the big stories has been where is Snowden or where is Waldo became part of the story for a long time, and that's where we were. I love this advertisement. There are now people using it. Dear Edward, there is a lot to uncover here. It says blush. You'll never have an opportunity to take advantage of it in the commercial world, but that's become kind of the story with him. And in July 1st, we found Snowden was now marooned in Moscow, having left Hong Kong, and what's going to happen to him. As the story develops, it was interesting. On July 5th, as I said last month, we have this illegal who had been here in the United States, Anna Chapman, who was arrested in June of 2010, pled guilty to FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act, and was exchanged for 4 Russians who worked for Western intelligence, and those 10 were sent back to Moscow. She became sort of a celebrity there and is continually a celebrity there. And she allegedly sends him a text, says, "Won't you marry me?" which is kind of an interesting, cute little thing, what happened to him. And I love what the Russians said about this time, because here's a couple of quotes about him. He says, "Wiretapping is so common, so this is not new news," says a Russian. And I don't understand what they're thinking. Is he a little boy with no ideas about the consequences? And that's a great quote. And what is he thinking? Well, on March 9th, we revealed that what Snowden did was actually a plan that was implemented in March. And it's revealed that this is premeditated espionage on his part. Now, when the story originally surfaces to us, it appears as if this young man had gone to Hawaii, had seen what NSA is doing, is so outraged by it that the American public needs to know about it, and decides to steal this material, borrow it, I guess, steal it, come out, make it public because now I'm outraged by it. That's the story. Well, the story seems to morph because as it now comes out, that on July 9th it's reported that he had contacted Laura, the woman on the left-hand side, in January, saying that I'm going to get this information because I want to make it public. Well, he's not working for NSA at that time. He's not working for Booz Allen at that time. But he's plotting in January to do it. He contacts another journalist in February. He says, I'm going to steal this information. I'm going to get this job. Well, that's as premeditated espionage as you can possibly be in January and February. And so in March, he said that he was granting me access to a list of machines all over the world the NSA hacked. That is why I appreciated the position, and that's why he says I accept the position. I joined it to steal the material. That's not a Booz Allen problem. That's a Snowden problem. So that's premeditated espionage. So on July 10th, as we pick up our story from our last GTEC, there's no Snowden or NSA articles. However, on the 13th, we finally find Snowden is applying for asylum in Moscow because it hasn't worked so well in the other countries he's looking at. And the Russians say the next day, well, he hasn't applied for asylum, so what's the story here? We're not sure where it's going. And then there's 2 stories that have been followed almost every single day. One is the story on NSA, and the other story is on Snowden himself. Now, the NSA story is interesting because from the very beginning, all elements of the U.S. government, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch have all said everything that Snowden is talking about that NSA is doing is legal. Now, we can always make decisions and change the law, but there's been no question that what he's doing is legal. It was initially presented as there must be some outrage going on in NSA that they're doing this, it must be illegal. But if you actually follow closely, every part branch of government, all 3 have said, this is legal. You can change the law, but it's legal. And so now is the base of one of the things is NSA's chief methods fueled debate on privacy. Yes, that is debate going on as a result of it, and where that takes us, I'm not sure. That's a headbait article. And then the classified programs are challenged in courts, but of course people have filed suit. But the fact is that courts have already decided it's legal. Now they can change the law, as I said. And And then there are people who've always opposed this, and so now you have a legal basis for doing it. That's the story on July 16th. And then finally, the 17th, he applies for asylum in Russia, and he's granted it. At Europe, which is really interesting, and we picked this story up at the end of June, and the outrage in Europe was the fact that, my God, Americans are spying. My favorite was the French. The French were outraged that spying's going on here. That's like going into Casablanca and saying there's gambling going on here. I'm shocked and appalled there's gambling going on here. Well, the French certainly do this, and all the other countries do this. But the story morphed in Europe to an internal criticism that their governments were working with American intelligence, and now they started turning inward about criticizing what the Germans are doing and what the French are doing. That became the news story of the day, less criticism of NSA, but internal criticism at that time. Well, the story then turns to about, if he's going to get asylum, what's the life like for defectors in Moscow? So I like to divert this story and give you a little bit of pieces on that one. What is a potential life for Snowden in Moscow? Well, historically, not very good. There is a great article that we have posted in, there's a study that was done by the Senate Select Committee, and it was done about the defectors that we know. This came out in March of 1979. It's worth reading if you're interested in this. We have this on Spypedia, but it kind of tells stories of some people that you may never have known. But none of these stories have a happy ending. None of them, it turns out well for them. Now, last month, I gave you a very long story about two young men who were almost identical to Snowden, and they were Martin and Mitchell. One was 29, one was 31. They defected in September of 1960. They had a news conference just like he did. They revealed information identical to what he was doing, different technology, that the United States intelligence community spies on other countries. That comes as a big surprise, I'm sure, to everybody. That was the story in 1960, and then these two men faded away, were never able to leave Russia. Turns out they were very unhappy. It takes the U.S. intelligence community a significant amount of time to uncover what happened to them. 3 great books on their lives. Our 1981 story, The Anatomy of Two Traitors. The other one, Puzzle Palace, about NSA. The other one, The KGB Inside Story. And then the last best book ever about the Matrokin archives, which were obtained by the United States intelligence by a man on the inside of Russian intelligence who copied them and brought them out and gave them to us. And kind of the rest of the story, it's called The Sword and the Shield. It's a book that anybody in the spy business would be interested in. It's almost a Bible as to what's happened in these stories. It's a phenomenal book. But you put those 3 together, and we realized that Martin died just on the border, looking over at America, wanting to come back here, never could, and he dies at the age of 55 years old in Tijuana. And the other one, Mitchell, he will die in St. Petersburg with his wife. They both wanted to get out of Moscow, weren't allowed to do it. He dies in 2001 at the age of 73. I told you that story in greater detail last month. How many have heard probably of Victor Hamilton? Probably nobody that's heard of Victor Hamilton. This is another man who defected that's got an interesting story.
Fascinating story for you, a little complicated, hope you can follow it. It was 30 years ago this month, in June 1962, that Victor Norris Hamilton said goodbye to his wife and 2 daughters and defected to the Soviet Union. Imagine their shock when they learned last week that he has spent the last 3 decades, 30 years, in a Russian psychiatric prison. He was known only as Mr. K. Hamilton's true identity was pieced together by Susan Messenai and her colleagues at the ARC Project, a group that searches for U.S. prisoners of war. So joining us this morning from Moscow is Susan Messenai. And with us here in New York is the wife of Victor Hamilton, Lily Hamilton, who comes from Union City, Georgia. And let me thank you both for being with us. Let me start, Lily, with you, and let me try to piece this together chronologically. Now, your husband defected. Why?
He had worked for the National Security Agency for 2 years and was dismissed for medical reasons, and he felt that he had been mistreated. But of course it was his illness speaking.
You say he was ill?
He was ill then.
Was it a mental illness? Or?
Yes.
And you were that?
I was aware of it.
And he was grieved at the National Security Agency and therefore took this action?
Yes.
All right, when did you last hear from him?
In 1973, I had a letter, a very brief note, about 4 or 5 lines. It said almost nothing.
You had no idea idea of where he was or what his condition was.
And then, no.
And you never remarried, is that right?
No.
You raised 2 daughters by yourself?
Yes.
And have presumed all this time that he was dead?
Yes.
But you had no word of that?
Only a brief message from a government official saying that they thought they had heard an American was in a psychiatric prison in Moscow, and they thought it was he.
When did you hear that?
Oh, some 8 or 10 years ago.
All right, so there was some thought that perhaps...
Yes, but no proof, no real word.
Had you asked anybody? Had you asked Susan and her group, for instance, to look for him?
Well, at that time, I didn't know that Susan and her group existed. We did contact the Soviet embassy to try to make contact to see if he was still alive. His relatives in the Middle East did the same thing.
But you got no word from them?
No word at all. We were told to go through the Red Cross, and it was all time wasted.
All right. Susan Messner, let me turn to you. When did you get a line on the fact that there may be a U.S. prisoner in a psychiatric hospital there?
Actually, I wasn't the one who got the information initially. It came in March to Boris Yuzhin, who's our associate director, in response to a program that was broadcast on Top Secret on Russian television. We were asking for new information. And an unnamed doctor phoned in and said that she had treated this prisoner in the 60s and didn't really consider him insane. And Boris did the legwork in tracking him down to Special Hospital number 5.
Has the Russian government been cooperative in this search?
I don't know. I wasn't here. This was a surprise in my life, believe me.
Well, he was imprisoned for what? I mean, have they given you any explanation as to why he was held so long?
The doctors were the ones who were cooperative down the line when Boris was doing his search, particularly the doctors of Special Hospital number 5, who wanted him to be in touch with his family, but they had no idea who he was. He was known as simply the letter K.
How did you piece together who he is?
They loaned me his journals. I sat up all night of my first night here reading, and having spent some time talking to Victor, I had a real sense of him, so I read them and I began to piece together his life. Although he uses many names in the course of the journal. He uses his original name, which was the one I was really initially looking for him under.
Well, since he could...
The one thing
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The one thing I realized was that he came from a place called Union City, because one of the sort of most natural and gentle and joyful lines was about riding a bicycle from Union City to Fairborn and how many kilometers it was.
Well, since he couldn't tell you who he is and whatever, that certainly leads to the idea that his psychological condition may still be significantly impaired.
He's very frightened. I mean, he's a lovely man to talk to. He's got a lot of pride, and it's like talking to an official in many ways. But he's very defensive. I couldn't ask him a direct question. I had to just work around. It was very helpful to read the journals. He wouldn't have given me any of that personal information.
Lily, after all this time, knowing that there are still psychological problems, he's going to come home? You want him home?
We want him, but we want him cared for. That is one of our main concerns, that he be cared for properly when and if he comes here.
Can you do?
Kind of a forgotten case. Another case you may have known about, a man named Edward Lee Howard. I was involved in actually training him to go to Moscow. In the process of doing that, this 3-year case officer, Howard, was at first had been in the Peace Corps. He then was initially turned over. He was turned down for CIA employment because of drug use. He rejoined the CIA after that time, and he attended training to be for an overseas assignment. He was selected to go to Moscow on a covert assignment working out of the embassy at that time in '83, and his dream ends when in his second polygraph, it's uncovered minor, continuous drug use, well employed, and petty theft. As a result of that, the case was referred to, and he lied about aspects of his training, and after that, the Office of Security fired him. So 3 months in, his dream ends. What's he do about it? Well, after he walks out, he then goes back to Arizona where he is, and he will make a telephone call. He writes a letter initially. He writes a letter to the Soviet embassy in Switzerland, volunteering to be a spy, saying that he wants to be met at the nation's capital here in Washington, D.C. And that was in the summer of 1983. Remember, he had gotten fired in June. He wrote this letter. Well, the KGB here in Washington did not respond right away. They figured that this might be a provocation. Eventually, they recontacted him a year later in the summer of 1984, and they set up and did have their very first clandestine meeting with him in Vienna on September of 1984. He had one more meeting, and that was April 29th of 1985. It was his only and second last meeting with the KGB in 85. Well, based on the defection of a man by the name of Vitaly Yurchenko here in Washington, D.C., in August of 1985, he identified Howard as a possible spy. That started a full investigation by the FBI of him in his home, and that investigation started on August 15th. But he had already gone to Europe. He had been warned by the KGB that there had been a defector and that he might be under surveillance. When he came back, he detected the surveillance, and so one night he engineered an escape with his wife, and he escaped to Moscow in September 21st of 1985, well under investigation. That's a whole story unto itself I don't have time to go into here, but it's an interesting story. So he was in Moscow on radio, living there in a dacha that he had for himself, and he did not come back to the United States, and he dies by breaking his neck when he fell off the loft in Moscow in July 12, 2002, and there was some discussion, well, maybe he was actually killed. I don't think there's any evidence of that. However, there are a lot of myths about this case that you'll find in the media, but that's the fact of the matter is that he was not murdered to my knowledge. There's also some other three very important, great, spies that lived a little bit better. There were three, the Cambridge Five, as you may have heard about. Lots of books written about this particular case. Kim Philby is the man I'm talking about, along with Burgess and Blunt. Goes back to the 1950s, but there's some great books on this story. And it turns out that he had a very difficult, Kim Philby had a tough time when he was there. But there's one man that saved him, who came in and knew it wasn't going well for him, and actually tried to rehabilitate the fact that he was having a huge drinking problem when he was there. And that man is Oleg Kalugin, a major general in the KGB. And just for your information, my friend and colleague in the back, Oleg, would you please stand up? Oleg Kalugin is the man. And if you'd like to talk to Oleg when we're done here, he's a great resource. He's a member of the board here. He speaks a lot of time here. We do a lot of joint training together. He actually saved this man's life because he lived in his apartment, but he was under surveillance the whole time, both wiretapped and audio tapped. And he would get up in the morning. He had a Russian wife, and I got to meet her. She wrote a book about him. She said, yes, he'd drink his tea and listen to BBC every morning in his chair, thinking about where he was. He eventually dies in Moscow in 1988. The circle is around Oleg, who did attend his funeral when he died there. And so considering all the people who have defected, it kind of went well for him, but he was a very unhappy man based on most reporting, even based on what his wife said. But Oleg did make an effort to try to help him. Obviously, Oleg was active in the KGB at that time. So life has not always gone well historically for people who defected. Now, back to Snowden, where does he stand? Well, interesting, secrets don't match Snowden's type. Letters to the editors are coming in, many of them not in support of what he has done. That has been one of the great debate. They went back to NSA and started talking about NSA program expanded significantly when, as a result of 9/11. It was interesting, if you'll go back and look at the media reports after the Boston bombing on April 15th, and they said, how could these men have not been known by the government? They were on the internet putting on jihad messages. Why didn't they know about it? Well, if you actually make that argument, and people were making that argument, the only way you'd know that is if you monitor the internet, right? This is exactly what NSA was doing. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say bad government didn't know about the Boston bombing, should have known about it, and then say bad government, you shouldn't be monitoring these types of communications. You can't have it both ways. And so, but we do. We demand it both ways at all times. And if someone is caught, then there's not a problem. If they're caught after the fact, why didn't you catch them earlier, is almost always the debate. And that's really how this case is unfolding. What is interesting, I don't know if you know about Freedom House, but Freedom House tracks freedom around the world. They put out reports. It's an independent group. And they have this grouping here. Number one, black countries are worst of the worst. Green, the blue is not free, the yellow is partially free, and the light blue is free. By the way, you live in a country that's rated as blue. However, if you start looking at these countries here, this is China, that is not free. And then you have something like Cuba, which would be worst of the worst. Then you have places like Ecuador, worst of the worst. Then you have places like Venezuela, which is not free, and places where he is today, not free. Interesting statement, right? All the places he wants to go for freedom are places that aren't free. It's also interesting, Freedom House came out with a report on how free is Russia, and on their evaluation of the 197 countries that meet their qualifications to be free, Russia was 176 out of 197. So that doesn't sound like a good mark to me as to where he now is living. They also rate them, the best of these ideas of state, freedom, civil liberties, political rights, is you're looking for a number one. And Freedom House rates Russia as these number, not free. Freedom state 5.5, civil liberties 5. And that's a scale from 1 to 7, 7 being the worst. It's an independent group saying it's probably, does not have the freedom that you would imagine. So what was interesting in this is then we had the United States said we won't seek the death penalty for Snowden. Well, first of all, there's no way to extradite Snowden here. The only way Snowden can leave Russia is if Russia put him on a plane and sent him here, not being extradited, because you cannot extradite for espionage. So from a legal standpoint, but they could put him on a plane and send him here. What's he going to do about that? That's about the only way legally he could come back here to the United States. Then we said we won't seek the death penalty. We don't seek the death penalty in espionage cases because we want the perp to remain in jail so that you continue to talk to him. And that's even true for Ames and Hansen. So that's what we say, but it's also what we do. Then we had some people supporting him, editorial supporting him. He gave us a gift to know about what his government's doing. In the middle of this is this headline. And if you saw this headline, it would have been shocking to you. Manning acquitted of aiding the enemy. And your first reaction is, Manning is acquitted? Well, not exactly, because Manning is actually not exactly found guilty of all these other issues. So he's got all these other charges, which he's now having a hearing on, but he was not acquitted of espionage, multiple times of espionage. And he was facing 131 years. He's now facing 90 years on these charges, and he's already been found guilty of all of those. I just found it fascinating that if you read the headlines and that's all you looked at, he got off, not even close. He was acquitted to aiding the enemy. Everything else he's found guilty of, and you do this. We track this on Spypedia, and you can go in and look at the charges. We've been following this on a daily basis. Enter the end of July, his father. And his father offers firm defense of his son. So now he wants to, he says he loves this nation. He's a patriotic American. Booz Allen comes out on August 1st and saying he was not our kind of person, the CEO thing. This has been very difficult from a public diplomacy standpoint because now it's a punchline for Booz Allen for lack of security, which has been a real problem since they work for the government primarily. So then there was an article about the reason that you had this problem was sequestration. What? That it's all about sequestration. If they hadn't done that, he wouldn't have gotten the job. If he hadn't gotten the job, he wouldn't have stolen the material. That's what his father's saying. He chose to do this by himself. I don't think if you study it, sequestration has anything to do with it, but that's the news story. Sequestration is at fault. Then for 5 days, he falls out of the news. And he says, but then he comes back onto the news and that he departs the airport and he's going someplace. Now let me make a quote here that you probably haven't heard in the news, but you should know. If your impression that when Snowden's living in the airport, that he's living on a bench like you would do if you got caught in an airport, that's not true. He's not looking at the pictures you saw of two little beds stuck in a corner. There's a VIP lounge in the airport that he was staying at. It's a high-end hotel room. That's where he was staying. I know people who have been in that room, and they said it's not anything like the pictures you saw. So his time in the airport wasn't quite exactly as harsh as you would picked up by our media. But they don't know because they've never been there, wouldn't have a reason to know him. So then the latest development, and I'm sure you know this, is that Obama cancels his meeting with Putin as a result of this issue. That's a big issue. A lot of people supported that. Also was interesting, the Wall Street Journal came up with an article about Robert Snowden because of the curse of asylum in Russia, and he started talking about the Howard case. This is partly true, but if you actually read this article, there was a lot of myth in this article that he wrote out, like the fact that the FBI was tracking all over the world and trying to arrest him. They're saying that he went to Cuba. There's no evidence Howard ever went to Cuba. And I was really surprised because this guy said, I know it all, I was in Moscow, I interviewed the guy. But it's an interesting article, and he says that life hasn't gone well for Howard. That's true, but there's an awful lot of mistakes in it. But that's not uncommon in the media, and he has some in that. So if you read that article, there are some falsehoods, and if you ever want to talk to me about it or email me about it, I can expand on that. So then there's the debate if he cancels the meeting, and there's debate about what has been our relationship with it. Two interesting articles here. Finally, a red line that's a red line becomes the article, and the other ones that, but Putin, the president, has stood firm. He has, this is a radical clarity. The president was decisive. This was personal. The summit is off. And then the article about what the development of our relationship, and then canceling on Putin became the editorial in the Washington Post. And then this interesting paper came out. If you really want to read this, it's fascinating. I have it here. If you can't sleep tonight, you can take it home and read it. And it's all legal documents. But in essence, it's a 22-page paper about Department of Justice about why the NSA program is legal. So they make this argument that it's legal. Yesterday, the White House issued another white paper about why the NSA program is legal. So that has never been the big issue here. And as they said in this article, collection program is constitutional. It becomes the Department of Justice argument on this. And then they lay out the details. By the way, the whole NSA program has been reapproved by the FISA court, and it continues. As of the 10th, the president talks about the Snowden case in his press conference before he goes on vacation, and he rejects the characterization of Snowden as a patriot, and that there have been already uneasy relationships, that wasn't the real reason. So those are where we stand on the diplomatic relationships. I just thought this was an interesting political cartoon. If you missed it, I got to show it to you. Obviously, they're playing chess. The middleman, the pawn is Edward Snowden, and as you can see, Putin is not being very nice to him, and he gets up, and that's not a way to behave when the president walks away from the table. I just thought it was a tongue-in-cheek, pretty funny cartoon. You don't like it, well, I liked it. So then there are editorials on security and liberty that came out, and on the 11th, there's nothing new about Snowden, and as of yesterday, his father says he's going to visit his son in Russia and try to bring him back. That'll be interesting. And he has with him now the new hero is his lawyer, and there's a big spread in the style section about his lawyer and how he fights for causes, and he's going to take him over there, and we're going to do what we can to bring him back. So Lon, who was a Coastie from Coast Guard, is going over to try to talk to his son. We'll see, interesting how that develops as it comes up. And as of yesterday, he said that a lot of the talking shows, and you can imagine 60 Minutes and Dateline and everyone else is trying to get him to talk. He says that he would not appear for a TV interview because he doesn't want him to be the issue. And that's where we left the story. As of yesterday, this morning, there's no story. So if you come back on September 11th, I will pick up the story with you next month.